Good evening, I'm Bill Moyers. Can music change your life? It sure can if you're young, you're black, and you've never heard anyone sing the blues before. Tonight, a successful American playwright tells us how Bessie Smith spoke to his soul and his spirit, and why The Cosby Show doesn't. Join me for a conversation with August Wilson.
This program is made possible by a grant from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. A World of Ideas with Bill Moyers.
It's been a long road for playwright August Wilson, from a boarding house in Pittsburgh to the Broadway stage. Wilson worked in obscurity until 1984, when Ma Rainey's Black Bottom hit New York, his play about musicians who struggle not to sell out to white tastes.
We done sold Africa for the price that they made us. We done sold ourselves to the white man in order to be like him. Look at the way you dress. That an African, that's the white man. We're trying to be just like him. We done sold who we are in order to become someone else. We just imitation white man.
Well, what else are we gonna be living over here?
I'm Levy, just me. I ain't no imitation, nothing.
You can't change who you are by how you dress. That's what I got to say.
It ain't all how you dress, it's how you see the world, it's how you follow life.
It don't matter what you talking about. I ain't no imitation white man. I don't want to be no white man.
Beneath that drive to be someone, Wilson found bitterness.
God, take a nigger's prayers and throw them in the garbage. God don't pay niggers no mind.
In fact, God hates niggas. Hate him with all the fury in his... Jesus don't love you, nigga. Jesus hate your black ass. Come talking that shit to me, talking about burning in hell. Nigga, God can kiss my ass.
Wilson took that fury and created a powerful drama about fatherhood in his next Broadway production, Fences, starring James Earl Jones as Troy Maxon.
You eat every day.
Yes, sir.
Got a roof over your head.
Yes, sir.
And clothes on your back.
Yes, sir.
Why you think that is?
Because of you.
Hell, I know it's because of me. Why you think that is?
Because you like me?
Like you? I go out of here every morning and bust my butt, putting up with them crackers all day long because I like you? You're the biggest fool I ever saw. It is my job.
Wilson won the Pulitzer Prize for Fences in 1987. He is writing a cycle of plays to resurrect black voices from every decade of this century. For all his success, Wilson lives quietly in Minnesota. I visited him at the Playwrights Center here in Minneapolis, which supported his work early on and where he still feels at home. Your plays are set in the past. Joe Turner, 1911, Ma Rainey, 1927, Fences, the 1950s. Do you ever think about writing about now, about what's happening in your time and mine today?
I don't look at our society today too much. My focus is still in the past. And part of the reason is because when I do the wellspring of my art and what I do, I get from the blues. So I listen to the music of the particular period that I'm working on. And I think inside the music is clues to what is happening with the people. And I don't know that much about contemporary music. So if I were going to write a play set 1980, I would go and listen to the music.
And why were blues so important? Is it Ma Rainey who says that you sing the blues not to feel better, but to understand life?
Sure, the blues are important primarily because they contain the cultural expression, the cultural response to blacks in America and to the situation that they find themselves in. And contained in the blues is a philosophical system at work. And as part of the oral tradition, this is a way of passing along information. And in order, if you're going to tell someone a story, if you want to keep information alive, you have to make it memorable so that the person hearing it will go tell someone else. This is how it stays alive. So blues was a way of doing that, and the music then provided you with emotional reference for the information. And it was sanctioned by the community in the sense that if someone else sung the song, or other people sang the song, and they kept it alive because they sanctioned the information that was contained in it.
You remember the first time you heard the blues?
I do. Very specifically, I remember Bessie Smith. I used to collect 78 records that I would buy from St. Vincent de Paul store at 5 cents a piece, and I did this indiscriminately. I would just take whatever was there, 10 records, and I listened to Patti Page and Walter Houston, September Song. And one day in my stack of records, there was a yellow label record that had a typewritten label, which was kind of odd. And I put it on, and there was nobody in town could bake a sweet jelly roll like mine. It was by Bessie Smith, of course. And I listened to it, and I had one of those old 7/8s where you had to keep putting a needle in. Yeah. And I recall I listened to the record 22 straight times. I had never in my
22?
life, 22, and just over, you know, I had never heard anything like it. And I was literally stunned by its beauty. It was very much different than Patti Page singing whatever she was singing. And it spoke, there was an immediate emotional response.
What did it say?
Well, it was someone speaking directly to me.
About?
About the fact that this is mine, and this is something that I can connect with, that I instantly, emotionally understood that all that, the rest of the music I was listening to did not concern me, was not a part of me. But this spoke to something in myself, and it said, this is yours.
You said earlier that music is a way of processing information. What was the information the blues brought to a kid named August Wilson?
One, that there could be, that there was a nobility to the lives of blacks in America, which I didn't always see. I was at that time living in a rooming house in Pittsburgh. And after I discovered the blues, I began to look at the people in the house a little differently than I had before. I began to see a value in their life that I simply hadn't seen before. I discovered a beauty and a nobility to, in essence, what was their struggle simply to stay alive, their struggle to survive. The mere fact that they were still able to make this music, it was a salute to, it was a testament to the resiliency of their spirit.
You know, as you talk, I think of these black teenagers in the ghetto, Newark in particular, where I spent a lot of time filming a documentary for CBS. And I think of those moments in Joe Turner, when your play, when the characters are absolutely struck dumb because, as you wrote, they ain't got words to tell. Mm-hmm. And I think of those kids in Newark. They don't have words to tell their story. Mm-hmm. The blues don't speak to them. It's mainly rap. Mm-hmm. Do you think August Wilson could write a play about those kids?
Sure. I mean, we come out of the same tradition. We come out of the same culture. I haven't, as I was saying earlier, I haven't actually stopped to look at what is happening with them in their particular life yet. But there's no question, because it's me also.
You were a dropout, like a lot of these kids in the ghetto today. Who reached you? Who brought the poet to life in you?
I think it was my mother. I mean, she's the one who taught me how to read. And also, reading was very important to her, because she stressed the idea that if you can read, you can do anything.
But if you could read, why did you leave high school?
I was bored. I was confused. I was disappointed in myself. I didn't do any work in after school until my history teacher assigned us to write a paper on a historical personage. I chose Napoleon.
Why Napoleon?
I had always been fascinated with Napoleon because he was a self-made emperor. Victor Hugo said that Napoleon's will to power. It was the title of my paper, and I submitted it to my teacher. And he didn't think I had written it, and he wanted me to explain to him. And I, had my bibliography and my footnotes, and I felt that's all the explanation I should give. And the upshot of that was he gave me a failing grade on a paper. He had written an A+ on it, or an E, and said, I'm going to give you one of these two grades. And when I refused to prove to him that I had written a paper, other than to say that I had written it, he circled the E and handed it back to me, and I tore the paper up, threw it in his wastebasket, and walked out of the school. I was 15 years old, and I did not go back. However, the next morning, I got up and I went and played basketball right underneath the principal's window. And as I look back on it, of course, I wanted him to come out and say, why aren't you in school? So I could tell someone. And he never came out.
Do you ever go back to, what did they call it, the Hill? That was your area, the Hill in Pittsburgh?
Oh, sure, yeah.
What's happened to it?
Same thing has happened to most black communities. It's most of it is no longer there. It's the buildings and what used to be at one time a very thriving community, albeit a depressed community, but still there were stores and shops all along the avenue. They are not there anymore. When I left my mother's house, I went out into the world, into that community, to learn what it meant to be a man, and I still have family there. So I go back as often as I can. I go and I stand on the corner and say, yeah, this is me.
Have any of those people seen any of your plays?
They have, yes.
Do they talk to you about them?
They do. There are some of the guys on the avenue, people that you see just hanging out on the street. All I know, they don't really know what, they don't know anything. All I know is you did something. And they'll walk up and they say, hey, how you doing, man? We proud of you. It was the fact that someone from that community did something, whatever.
You once wrote, one of your characters said, everyone has to find his own song.
Yes.
How do these people find their song?
Well, I think they have it.
They have it.
They just have to realize that, and then they have to learn how to sing it. In that particular case in Joe Turner, the song was the African identity, and it was connecting yourself to that and understanding that this is who you are. You know?
As an African,
yes.
I mean, these people in Pittsburgh, you think, must find the African that's in them or in their past before they really know who they are?
We are Africans who have been in America since the 17th century. We are Americans, but we are, first of all, we are African. There's no way that you can dispute the fact that we're African people. We have a culture that is separate and distinct from the mainstream white America's culture.
But friends of mine who go back to Africa say that they find themselves thinking and being treated as if they were American tourists.
Yeah, no question. They're
Americans.
Sure, sure, and absolutely. And if you take these people I'm talking about, you take them back over to Africa, they walk around trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And there's no way that they can relate to that. You see, but the sensibilities are African. They are Africans who have been removed from Africa.
You know, the Jews in their Passover celebration always end by saying next year in Jerusalem. They have a fixed place, but what does it mean to next year in Africa?
Part of what our problem as blacks in America is one that we don't claim that. Partly, you see, because of the linguistic environment in which we live in. And I was in Tucson at a writers' conference, and I challenged my host to pull out his dictionary and look up the words white and black. And he looked up the word white, and he came up with things like white, unmarked by malignant influence, of desirable condition, a sterling man, upright, fair, and honest. And you look up the word black, and you get a villain marked by malignant influence, unqualified, violator of laws, etc. And these are actual definitions that are in Webster's dictionary. So this is a part of the linguistic environment, so that when white America looks at a black, they see the opposite of everything that they are not.
Some whites are saying today that for blacks in the ghetto to emerge into the mainstream of American life, they really have to become mainstream Americans. They've got to become part of the white culture, that you can't exist, you can't thrive in a mainstream culture unless you become like the mainstream culture.
Well, they hold up examples of the Irish, of the Germans. These are all Europeans who share the same sensibilities as the mainstream, so it's very easy for them to melt. But we cannot change our names and hide behind the label of being an American, because we're a very visible minority. You can look at us, you can see us coming a block away. So there's no way that we can melt into the power. Other races, for instance, the Orientals,
right.
They're allowed their cultural differences. You look at an Oriental, and they may do things very differently, and they do. They participate in the world differently than Europeans do.
Chinatown in San Francisco is a tourist attraction.
Yes.
Harlem is not.
Harlem is not, yes. So, but it's because we allow the Chinese to have their cultural differences. Not only do we allow them, we salute them for it. You see, but blacks are not allowed. Blacks are expected to become like whites, without really understanding, in order to do that we have to turn our head around almost 360 degrees. You see, because our worldviews are so drastically different to begin with.
But if blacks keep looking for the African in them, if they keep returning spiritually or emotionally to their roots, can they ever come to terms with this dichotomy, with living in these two worlds? Aren't they always going to be held by the past in a way that is potentially destructive?
Oh, I don't say it's potentially destructive at all. In other words, to say that I am an African, that I can participate in a society as an African, that I don't have to become, I don't have to adopt European values, European aesthetics, European ways of doing things in order to live in the world.
What's your opinion then of the Cosby Show? Do you ever see the Cosby Show?
It does not reflect Black America, to my mind.
In what sense?
Most of Black America is in housing projects, without jobs, living on welfare. And this is not the case in the Cosby Show, because all the values in that household are strictly what I would call white American values. It would be hard pressed to even you can search the entire United States, and I think you would be hard pressed to find that family, despite the fact that there are some blacks who have, quote, made it, who have money and who own their own houses, for instance, who are not on welfare, who are educated, who have responsible jobs. They actually make a very small portion of Black America. Most of Black America is crowded in housing projects looking for jobs.
Well, I understand that, but again, back to the Jewish Passover, where the Jews pray next year in Jerusalem. Since Africans don't have a Jerusalem, don't they have to say next year in the American dream, I have a dream that I can make it in this country? Isn't that the Jerusalem for Black Americans?
Well, maybe, but see, there's another part of Passover. And I was invited to one time, a friend of mine invited me. And I went, and I was struck by the very first words. And it starts off, we were slaves in the land of Egypt. You see, now that's the first thing, and then next year in Jerusalem comes at the end. But they were constantly reminding themselves of what their historical situation has been. So, you know, I think, for instance, I find it criminal in the fact that we, after hundreds of years in bondage, do not celebrate our Emancipation Proclamation. That we do not have a thing like the Passover where we sit down and we remind ourselves that we are African people, that we were slaves, because we try to run away, we try to hide that part of our past. We don't have that. If we did something like that, it would say this is who we are. We recognize the fact, one, that we are Africans. We recognize the fact that we were slaves. And we recognize that since we have a common past, that we have a common future also.
You remind me as you talk of the fact that both Jews and blacks have been through such great suffering, and yet as they went into the ovens or onto the slave ships, they kept singing the song of the Lord. And when I think of that, of the faith of both peoples, I think of Levy in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Remember, he hears that a white mob has forced a black preacher to humiliate himself.
Yes.
And he cries out, where the hell was God when all this was going on? Mm-hmm. What's August Wilson's answer to that question?
Well, it was the wrong God that he was expecting to come and help him. I think, as he later points out, he answers the question himself. He said, because it's a white man's God. The fact that Africans, when they came to America, their religion was stripped from them, everything, their language, culture, ideas. And when you look in the mirror, you should see your God. If you don't, you have somebody else's God. So, in fact, what we do is we worship an image of God, which is white, right? Which is the image of the very same people. We're talking about image now. The very same people who have oppressed you, who have put you on the slave ships, who have beaten you and who have forced you to work, etc. The image was a white man.
So the God of the slave holder can't be the God of the slave?
Without question, no. It's two different things.
Well, the paradox for August Wilson, at least to me, if I can be personal for a minute, is you had a white father.
I did, yes.
And yet you chose the black route.
Because the cultural environment of my life was black. So this is how I grew up. I learned black culture at my mother's knee, so to speak.
You didn't make a conscious choice. I'm going to choose black over white.
No, this is just who I always have been. The cultural environment of my life has always been the forces that have shaped me. The nurturing, the learning have all been the black ideas about the world.
You see, when I went to Fences, I wept. I wasn't an outsider, even though it was about the black experience in America. I wept at the relationship between the father and the son, at the mother who was so loyal to a disloyal husband, at the importance of tradition, the role of the community. I wept. I was not an outsider there. I felt a part of that experience you were writing about, but you were writing about black Americans.
I try to explore, in terms of the life I know best, those things which are common to all culture. So, while the specifics of the play are black, the commonalities of culture are larger, the universalities in the play. So I think you were able to make connections with the fathers, because the play is, the specifics are black, but you have father-son conflict, you have husband-wife, you have whatever.
So you're not unsympathetic to those blacks who look at the Huxtables in the Cosby Show and see there something that they want, something to achieve. You're saying that's not the whole story.
It's not the whole story. And of course, everyone, I mean, you can go into Newark, in the ghetto of Newark, and you ask the people what they want. They want decent homes. They would like to be the Huxtables. This is what they want, but there are no avenues for them to do that. In order to do that, one, you have to deny it. White America, the social contract that white America has given blacks is, if you want to participate in society, you have to deny who you are. You cannot participate in a society as Africans. You can't come and bring that African stuff.
But the dominant commercial ethos in America is so strong that it seems to me, and there are so many more people who watch television than attend the plays, that it seems to me the Huxtables are winning the battle for the black imagination, and that the August Wilsons and the Troy Matsons and the Ma Rainey's are losing. Yes,
but you see, I think even blacks who sit up there and look at the Cosby Show, and while they may want to participate and share some of the wealth, say, of the Cosby, they understand that's foreign to them. That is not the way they live their lives. That is not the way they socialize. They recognize it immediately as that's the way white people do that. But they would like to have that and still be who they are, and still socialize and do the things that they do. So they would probably go out and buy a big Cadillac because their sense of style is different. And it might be a yellow one or a pink one. And it's simply aesthetics. Basically, we do everything differently. But we still would like to have, you know, whatever rewards the society has to offer to someone who is willing to work and who has a talent to basically to sell.
You once said, Mr. Wilson, that the most valuable blacks were those in prison who had the warrior spirit, as you called it, in the African sense. Men who went out and got for their women and children what they needed when all other avenues were closed to them. Who do you think has the warrior spirit in America today? Who's fighting the battle?
I think those same people, for the most part. I think ever since since the first Africans set foot on the continent, there has been a resistance. And I think that this spirit is best exemplified in those, not necessarily all of them are in the penitentiary, but the ones, because of that spirit, they find themselves on the opposite side of the society that has constantly tried to crush that spirit.
I was going to suggest maybe the middle class, the black middle class, possesses that warrior spirit today, in the sense that they're struggling in a white man's world to make it, to provide for their children, to keep that house, pay that mortgage, send those kids to school, to live the life of responsibility, that there's a struggle going on there in the black middle class.
The real struggle has been since Africans first set foot on the continent, an affirmation of the value of oneself. And I think if, in order to participate in American society, in order to accomplish some of the things which the black middle class has accomplished, if you have had to give up that self in order to accomplish them, then you are not making an affirmation of the value of the African being. You're saying that in order to do that, I must become someone else. I must become like someone else. The example I always use is I was in the bus station in St. Paul, and I saw 6 Japanese Americans who were sitting down having breakfast. And I sat there and observed them, and they chatted among themselves very politely. And they ate their breakfast, they got up, and they paid the bill. And they walked out, and I sat there, and I said, what would have been the difference if 6 black guys had come in here and sit down? What is the cultural differences? And the first thing I discovered is that none of the Japanese guys played the jukebox. So the first thing, when 6 black guys walk in here, somebody's going to go over to the jukebox. They're going to put a quarter in the jukebox. Somebody's going to come up and say, hey, Roddy, man, play this. And he's going to say, no, man, play your own record. You know, hey, I ain't playing with you. Don't play my record, man. Put your own quarter in there. The second thing I noticed, no one sent anything to the waitress. Now, 6 black guys go, hey, mama, what's happening? What's your phone number? Now, don't talk to him. He can't read. Right? But give me a phone number. The guy's going to get up to play another record. Somebody's going to steal a piece of bacon off his plate. He's going to come back and say, man, who been messing with my food? I ain't playing with y'all. Don't be messing with my food. When the time come to pay the bill, it's going to be, hey, Joe, loan me $1, man. Right? So if you were a white person sitting observing that, you would say they don't know how to act. They loud. They don't like one another. The guy wouldn't let him play the record. The guy stole food off his plate. But if you go to them 6 guys and say, what's the situation here? You find out they're the greatest of friends. And they're just having breakfast the same way the Japanese guys had breakfast, but they do it a little differently. This is just who they are in the world. They cannot not do it like that because that's who they are.
So you've answered my question. I was going to ask you, don't you grow weary of thinking black, writing black, being asked questions about blackness?
Oh, how could one go weary of that? I mean, you never transcend who you are.
From the Playwrights Center in Minneapolis, this has been a conversation with August Wilson. I'm Bill Moyers.